the mysterious girl who disappeared. I'm from New Hampshire, and back in my early 20s, I lived about 30 minutes outside of Manchester. I was in the middle of a rough patch in my life, having just ended a 2-year relationship with a girl. It was a confusing time, where I felt like I was just drifting, trying to figure things out without even knowing what I was searching for. Around that time, I started spending more Sundays with my grandmother, who had always been deeply religious. She went to church religiously, no pun intended, after my grandfather passed. He had been a decorated veteran, well known in our community, and his death left a huge hole in her life. I didn't believe much in church, but I went to keep her company, feeling like maybe I needed some grounding too. Despite her grief, my grandmother's faith was unshaken. She told me that she knew my grandfather was with the Lord now, and it gave her comfort. I couldn't help but admire that kind of unwavering faith, the kind that brings real peace. It was something rare, something people search for their whole lives, even if they can't always express it. One Sunday after service, something happened that I'll never forget. I saw her, the girl I had never noticed before. Our town was small, and the church community even smaller, so seeing a new face was unusual. She had dark, curly hair and deep hazel eyes that caught my attention immediately. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about her. After the service, I approached her and we started talking. There was an immediate spark between us, a connection I'm sure anyone would recognize when you meet someone and just know you belong together. Her name was Isabella, and she had this quiet, mysterious charm about her that intrigued me. At first, she was evasive when I asked about her past. She'd crack jokes and tell me I'd have to take her out for dinner if I wanted the details. I enjoyed the banter and the playful back and forth. After some light teasing, she finally told me that her family had recently moved to the area and she was attending college nearby. That explained why I hadn't seen her before. We exchanged numbers, and over the next week, we texted almost daily. I remember scrolling through her Instagram, surprised by how few followers she had. Honestly, I liked that. The last thing anyone wants is to fall for someone who's already famous, or worse, everyone else's obsession. As we talked more, she opened up about her family, but not in a way that made her sound bitter or resentful. She was just telling me her truth. Her stepfather was an abusive alcoholic, and she and her mother had been through a lot. Her biological father was even worse, but she never gave me many details. All I knew was that they had moved to get away from him, leaving behind everything she knew. I didn't want to press her too much about her father, but I was grateful that she was trusting me with her story. The more I got to know her, the more I was drawn in. The mystery surrounding her past was part of the allure, but I also felt like I could help in some small way. The following Sunday, I saw her again at church. I took it as a sign that maybe I should ask her out, so after the service, I did. She smiled at me and said yes without hesitation. We made plans for later that week, and I spent the rest of the week anxiously thinking about our first date. When the night came, we kept things simple. We watched a movie and grabbed a bite to eat. Nothing fancy, just a chance to talk and get to know each other more. Everything felt so natural with her. She was a great listener, and it seemed like she genuinely cared about what I had to say, which was refreshing. I didn't want the night to end, so after dinner I suggested we go for a drive. I thought it would be a good way to keep the conversation going, without the noise of a restaurant. We drove out of town, taking one of those roads that felt more like a country highway, with trees lining both sides. The air was cool, and the night felt perfect, peaceful even. That's when things changed. Out of nowhere, Isabella started speaking, but not in English. Her words were fast, mumbled, and sounded almost like French or something close to it. At first I thought she was joking, or maybe messing with me, but then I looked at her face and I froze. Her eyes rolled back, leaving only the whites, and I swerved the car, nearly crashing into the guardrail. My heart was pounding in my chest. It was like she was in a trance or having some kind of seizure. I managed to pull the car over to the side of the road, trying to stay calm. Inside, I was panicking. I grabbed my phone and called an ambulance, not knowing exactly what to say, just telling them I thought she was having a seizure. I kept checking on her, but she was still talking in that strange language, her head vibrating. I was terrified, not knowing what to do. I wanted to help, but I didn't want to make things worse. I've never been more frightened in my life. Then, just as suddenly as it all started, it stopped. Isabella snapped her head to look at me, her eyes going back to normal. She blinked, and the wild, wide-eyed expression she gave me was something I'll never forget. Before I could say anything, she opened the car door and sprinted into the woods. Yes, she literally ran into the woods. I was too stunned to move. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. I couldn't understand it. My hands were trembling, my head was spinning. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, trying to process the chaos. Eventually, the cops and paramedics arrived. I told them everything, the strange language, her eyes, how she ran off into the woods. They nodded and took my statement, assuring me they'd try to find her. But that was the last time anyone saw her. She was gone. I looked for her at church, but she never showed up. Her Instagram had been deleted, and she had blocked my number. When I had a friend text her, the number had been erased. No trace of her. I even asked people at church if they knew her, but no one did. To this day, I have no idea what happened to Isabella. I don't live in that area anymore, and honestly, my memories of home are kind of blurred because of that night. But one thing is for sure, I'll never forget her or what happened. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Nightmare Moment channel. If you found this video inspiring, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.